Taidile, Ramiko te Aniakuno, Dataino Hebeyono, Tomaria Korike, Dataria Alu Macao, que na NYC. So, mi nombre, my name is Ramiko te Aniakuno, soy de aquí, de la isla de Boriquén, vivo entre Humacao y NYC. Y yo empecé esta iniciativa que se llama Kiwari Taino Ahuikino o Queer Taino Voices o Voces Taines LGBT o Two-Spirit, como quieran identificarse, ¿verdad? Para darle un espacio a nuestra comunidad queer dentro de nuestra comunidad caribeña, indígena, taino, right? And I started this by having interviews with people and asking them to tell me their story and asking them questions about their identity and who they are and their work. And I recorded that, and I've sort of been trying to create like an archive of that. And then as a culmination, what we've done twice is have events, like a panel discussion event, just like this one, where we invite people from outside of the community, whoever, to tune into Zoom and have in these virtual events and just listen to the stories and the experiences of the people I'm interviewing. And so in the past I've interviewed Jeanette and Puya and Hid, and so there's been other people too who have interviewed. All of those interviews are on my YouTube channel. Has my name, so you can see past Kiwari Taino Ahuikino events that are on my YouTube channel, which I recommend you check out because there's so many gems, so many special things that people say and share. And so today I brought together this group of people who are doing amazing work in their own ways, who are part of the Taino community, who are part of the queer Taino community, to share about their perspective and their experiences, and to create a space, right, for us, for our own people. So all these people are artists, and I'm going to let them talk a little bit about who they are and the kind of work they do before we get into the questions. So I was thinking maybe we could start first with the folks on Zoom, and then we'll start with the folks in the room, if that's okay. So Jeanette, would you like to introduce yourself first? Is that okay?
Miyari, hello, hola everyone. Dairi Jeanette. My nombre es Jeanette. Dataino, Hereyono, Valia, Ipiquisqueya. My Taino ancestors are from Ipiquisqueya. My ancestors, mis ancestros Taínos son de Ipiquisqueya. Dakavia, Oka, Mohican, Mohawk, Kena, Monsilenape, Altura. I live on Mohawk, Mohican, Monsilenape lands. Vivo en las tierras de los Mohawk, Monsilenape, and Mohican folks. So that's a little bit about me. I'll pass it over to Puya.
Miyari apatoma Dairiben Kuyayakuno Pikiwani Kitalo. Hello everyone, my name is Eagle Eyes, Wisdom Keeper. Katraha Dewari Diawasi Biwasa. The pronouns do Naya and Dia. I'm queer two-spirit. My pronouns are they and them. She, her. Da Taino Hereyono, do Waria Iskeya, and Boriken. My Taino ancestors are majorly really from Iskeya, but my stepfather's from Boriken, and I grew up with many Boricuas. Daki Alara, Alu, San Diego, California, Bahio, Lang, Me Yayas, or Miayas, Luki. So I live in San Diego currently on the lands of the Umayas. Or otherwise known as Umias people. Gatraha Saruko Homse Kaitigo, Oma Bukia Ukaiganga Luborinking. I am very grateful to share with you all today in Borinking.
Thank you.
raíces son de Nahuatl y Humacao Boriquén. Dacavialú, Montelledra, Cupey, Guaynabó, Colindancia. Vivo ahora mismo en colindancia de Montelledra, Cupey y Guaynabó. Gracias.
Da Iribelia Toro, da
Taino heavy.
Taino Hebeño, María Boriquén, da Kenia,
La heavy algo.
San Juan Boriquén.
Thank you.
Miari, da Iribelia Celi, Aponte, da Hebeyono Taino, do María Quisqueya, y da Kevia Alu Boriquén, que na Lena Peoquín. Es que cuando uno está aquí se olvida todo.
Sí, porque yo lo tenía visto.
Con los nervios.
Veníamos practicando.
Una cámara aquí.
Le invito a todos, a ustedes y a nosotros aquí, que hablen en el idioma, ahora en la conversación, que hablen en el idioma que más se sientan cómodos, sea inglés, español, taíno, no sé, lo que, una mezcla, whatever. You know, it's all good. Okay. So I'm going to start with the first question, with la primera pregunta, and I'll read it in both English and Spanish so that it's recorded that way. So the first question I have for all of you is, how does your indigeneity and queerness inform the work that you do and your mission and your vision? ¿Cómo informa tu trabajo y tu visión, tu identidad indígena y queer? Whoever would like to start. Yeah.
I'll start.
Go ahead, Julia.
So, for me, you know, I came out as gay first, very young, but before that, I never felt like a boy. But when I did because I attempted suicide, and for me it was a spiritual experience, and I had ancestors, I had, I guess, a guide also come in and just push, pull me away from that attempt. And I wanted freedom. I wanted to tear down walls, and up until that point also I experienced a lot of bullying, physical and verbal abuse from family, and I didn't want that for myself, and I didn't want to carry that on to other people, and I just wanted to change the world, sort of. Back then, I really wanted to change the world. I was like a superhero. But my queerness now, coming out again, I guess, after, being with many transgender family and friends, my mission is much more broader and bigger. So I go out and I break down walls wherever I see I need to break them down, and my work, I do it in a way that it's going to open everyone's eyes. I'm a healer also, as well as an astrologer and tarot reader, and then my artwork, whatever it may be, photographs, because I have different mediums. I integrate all that. I want to push people's boundaries and see that we're all much more than just our bodies and our genitals, and that it extends much more farther than we think. So I like to blow people's minds too.
Kuya.
I will piggyback on what Kuya you just mentioned around what you have recognized your sort of mission and purposes in this physical plane is to illuminate and to elevate consciousness, right? I feel that resonates quite a bit with where I am in my journey at the moment. I'm, for lack of a better word, an educator, a teacher. I struggle with that simply because it's still holds quite a lot of hierarchical connotations. And I've been doing it for about 18 years now. And I think that for me, I've always understood that my work as a guide within Learning Space is to point to the ways that creativity is a birthright and is ancestral practice. That every single one of our ancestors were creators and innovators. And for a lack of language, for a variety of reasons, maybe they did not claim the title of artist or even of creator. But in modern times, in modern ways, we can. And now more than ever, it's important to separate creativity and artistic capability. I think that most people would consider what I do arts education, or that I am an arts teacher, but really I am simply illuminating our roots. The work that our families do with their hands, the work that we do in conversation and dialogue, for example, this one being a social sculpture, that we are exchanging in real time, and that there is energetic webs and networks that we are creating that we then share and take into all of the concentric circles of our community. And I think that when we consider our own lineage, I think it's important in Learning Space that everyone feels the agency, the vulnerability, the comfort in bringing in and breathing in their own ancestors into the space, their own mother tongues. And so that's very important for me in my mission and my vision in creating intentional spaces of gathering, that we can all come into that space being able to share all of who we are and all of what made us who we are in this very specific moment, because we are an amalgamation of all of our experiences of so many bodies. So how do we feel the agency to share in all of the diversity of all of our ancestral practice, right? And so I think that looks differently for every single one of us, and I work in spaces that folks are speaking 9, 10 languages, and that we can all learn from that, and I invite that within the space and within the circle that I'm creating, is that if I'm speaking in one way, how do we say this in your mother tongue, and how do we all then repeat it so that we all are sharing in your language and in what you're bringing and in your space and in your family, essentially. And then in terms of queerness, it's interesting because I wish that I had the language as a young person to speak about identity in the way that we can now and the way that we do now. As a young person, we didn't use certain terms, we didn't identify in the myriad of ways that we can now, simply because I think that language is fluid and it's constantly evolving and changing, and so are the connotations within words and within language and within vocabulary. So I couldn't identify as something when I was younger because I didn't have a model for that, nor did I have the word to describe the thing that I was feeling and also doing. So it wasn't until much later on in my life that I was able to hold down a word and even hold it enough that I can let it go, because I too am in constant transformation. And so what feels right for me in this moment may not feel right for me 5, 10, 15 years down the line, but also holding space for that ambiguity, because I think that's what queerness is holding space for ambiguity, for holding space for multiple definitions, for holding space for all of the ways that we can show up and change in an instant and in a moment, and how are we also embracing that constant fluidity and change.
Jeanette, thank you so much.
También soy educadora desde hace como 12 años. Y Sí, lo de la jerarquía es algo que también me ha preocupado porque yo también aprendo de las personas con las que estoy educando en el espacio. So, para responder más directamente la pregunta, el asunto con mi ingeniería, mi herencia indígena empezó desde que yo estaba en escuela superior, más o menos estaba con esta maestra que ella empezó como a collect people que tenían ciertos rasgos, pero she didn't say anything, she was just... Nos puso música, nos empezó a vestir de ciertas maneras y un día como que it clicked, like, oh, we're the taínos from, like, los más que lo aparentamos y estábamos intentando como promover la idea, el mensaje de que no estamos extintos, ¿verdad? Se evolucionó, hemos sido asimilados, hemos sido saqueados, muchas cosas bien locas nos han sucedido, especialmente en el contexto de la policolonia. But we're still here and we're queer. And en cuanto a mi queerness, I think I've always created weird art, and in that sense, my art is a reflection of my queerness. So being indigenous or like accepting and embracing that I am a brown person and that's okay, me ha ayudado. I work with clay, so I have connected with darker clay bodies, and I want to keep on connecting with clay bodies from the land. Because of the issues with importing materials, we have like this really huge problem here with ceramics. It's really expensive. Se duplica el precio no solamente porque lo compramos desde afuera, sino trayéndolo con el flete. It's a whole ordeal. Entonces, el conectar con mi identidad, conectar con barro, conectar con la madre, so to connect with clay, to connect with Mother Earth. So, of course, I want to connect with something that is from beneath my feet. So, es reconocerme como una persona que originaria de Boriquén. Yo soy del suroeste de la isla, mis ancestres son particularmente de una área conocida como la Indiera. No conozco muchas personas de allí porque nos mudamos a San Germán, que es un poquito más ciudad parecido a Old San Juan. So un poco me desconecté y tengo familiares que se niegan a aceptar que hay una herencia indígena y que la aparentamos. Es como que no, pero si el tatarabuelo era español, and I'm like, F that guy. So what about everything else? So I try to teach that in my classes, like to embrace darker clay bodies, because it's also the clay that's more abundant here. It's really red, it's really dark. And it's okay to create weird art. It's okay to be queer in any sense that you want to express that through your artistic style. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Gracias.
Pienso que mi realización vino primero, identificarme primero como una persona queer vino primero y después vino sentirme o permitirme llamarme autóctona de esta tierra. Y creo que fue como un bálsamo. It was like a medicine for my soul. Sentir que mi identidad no es algo nuevo, o mi vivencia, my way of living and loving is not something new or contemporary or no es un hype, no es un reel de TikTok. I mean, we've been here forever. Y creo que me trajo mucha paz empezar a conectar con la tierra, con comunidades y con gente que está puesta para crear desde la tierra y sanar nuestras heridas ancestrales. O sea, se habla mucho del trauma generacional, pero no de cómo soltamos esas heridas generacionales. Y todos tenemos derecho a sanar, tanto descendientes de colonizadores como nosotros, los descendientes de la gente que dio la lucha. Y creo que cuando empecé a aprender sobre todo lo que los arahuacos, los taínos, y empecé a permitírmelo vivir y sentir, también hubo como un poder, mi queerness cogió un poder bien fuerte, como porque me sentí protegida, me sentí cuidada por algo más grande. O sea, siendo una persona queer, trans mask, de género fluido, dos espíritus, he tenido que quitar un montón de cosas. Wait, I am not gay, wait, I'm not a lesbian, wait, I'm not this, porque siempre estamos comparándonos con la diáspora, mayormente diáspora blanca, colonizadora, gringa o eurocentrista. Era, espérate, ese traje me va, no me va. Y fue complicado ir sacando esas cosas. Y siempre me sentía sola, aislada. También tengo diversidad funcional, eso era como que otra intersección más que me hace desechable. Y todo eso, hace poco leí algo que decía, cuando siento que no encajo, voy a la naturaleza, que es there's where all we belong. Y eso es como que mi mantra. Yo cuando conecté mi ser autóctone de aquí y ser queer fue como que, exacto, estamos protegidos por nosotros mismos y por gente que ha estado aquí antes que nosotros. Y ese sentido de continuidad eterna me hizo sentir bien cabrón, porque vivimos en un mundo que capitalista, están quitando nuestras tierras, están privatizando nuestros lugares sagrados. De momento sentir que alguien hizo algo en un pasado que yo no conozco ni conocimos para que yo estuviera aquí hoy, me hace sentir bien agradecida y me hace poder sentir infinita y conectada con todo eso. Gracias.
Bueno, yo nací en Lenapehoking, New York City, y me crié ahí. Y me crié con una perspectiva, como muchos de nosotros, bien heteronormal, right? Heteronormativity, homofóbico, lots of homophobia. Y muchos quisqueyanos son bien homofóbicos, como muchos de nuestra comunidad. Pero los dominicanos se conocen como que son súper homofóbicos. O sea, ir allá a Quisqueya para nosotros es bien peligroso. Y hay que andar con... No solamente tienes que ocultar que tú eres americana o de afuera, o que viajas, que tienes visa, pero también toda tu identidad, ¿verdad? Como una persona queer. Yo fui maestra bilingüe de primaria, elementary school teacher. I was a bilingual elementary school teacher. And for me, now that I work at the university level with bilingual teachers, and people want to be bilingual teachers in New York City, where students come from all types of backgrounds, for me it's very important to bring this lens as a queer Taino that whose mission and vision is to decolonize, right? To decolonize the ways that we've been taught to see language, our bilingualism, multilingualism, and our gender and sexual orientation, our full identities, right? So the work that I do in New York City with teachers in bilingual education is to help them see outside of these boxes that we were given of quién habla el español correcto, qué tipo de valores de español tenemos que enseñar a los niños, qué tipo de inglés, who speaks the correct English, right? This narrative that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, in bilingual education, there's this belief that, okay, we're educating these kids whose families are Taino or Mexica, or they're coming in and we're educating them in Spanish, so that's enough. We're doing enough. We're using their home language, right? Ignoring the deeper colonial part of it, that language isn't even our language, right? So how do we dig even deeper? So that's some of the work I'm doing. I'm currently writing my dissertation in bilingual education at the CUNY City University of New York. Thank you. Por ahí voy. Pero I touch on that topic, right? That we fight each other on who speaks better Spanish, right? And this idea that que los dominicanos hablan más, y no sé qué. Well, it's a language that, right? The irony of it all is that it's a language we're not even supposed to be speaking. It was forced on us. It was forced on our ancestors in a violent way. And now we're here fighting que, no, que los colombianos hablan mejor, que los mexicanos, let's teach this type of Spanish in school. But how about we deconstruct, dismantle, disrupt all of that? And talk about what are we supposed to actually be talking, right? So how do we dig deeper? So I bring that anti-colonial lens and my queerness into that space, and really thinking about, I want kids to grow up with a better childhood than I did, thinking white is right, straight is right, right? this is the correct Spanish, this is the correct English, all these colonial ideologies that so many of our people are still eating, still biting, still breathing and living. And I want kids from as early as pre-K, kindergarten, to start having these conversations and see like, this is who we are, this is who we should be, this is who we can be, you can be yourself, and to help them develop that critical lens of unpacking from a very young age of what's this so-called correct way of speaking, correct way of being, correct way of loving, right? And that it's not new, right? Our ancestors lived this way, and now these are the generations that need to decolonize. That's how I do it in my work.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for what you just shared. I'm going to move on to my following question. And this is something that I think about a lot, and that is like, how do we navigate these systems in a way that we can stay sane, right? ¿Cómo navegamos estos sistemas coloniales y para nuestra salud mental, espiritual, nuestro cuerpo, ¿verdad? Like, how do we do it? And I think that the way that we learn es viendo otras personas, ¿verdad? Cómo esa persona lo hace y podemos like inspire each other, right? So my question, it goes around that route, right? It's like, how do you navigate the colonial, white supremacist, Christian-dominated society as a queer indigenous person? You know, what are the things that you do that help you stay focused and sane and feeling empowered, right? So in Spanish, ¿cómo navegas un mundo colonial de dominación cristiana, especialmente where we are right now, right? Supremacía blanca, ¿cómo te mantienes sane, enfocada y empoderada?
I can jump on what I was saying because it's so tied. So for me, I think it's important to find spaces in the colonial Christian white institutions that we're all part of, right? Unwillingly, we have to, in order to survive in this capitalist society, we have to be part of these institutions, right? So I'm part of universities, New York City public schools, et cetera, right? So for me, what keeps me going is working with teachers who have this drive and want to continue in this journey of decolonizing our mindset so that their students, our students, can have a better education, better schooling than we did, right? And to recenter the fact that education doesn't just happen in the classroom, right? So I always say schooling is in school, but education happens with our abuelitas, our tequinas, outside in the community, and working with those teachers and the children really keeps me going. So I think finding those cracks within these institutions, those spaces to disrupt, is the way that I do it. And of course, being here with all of you all, showing up unapologetically being yourself. And I took notes of them, like, these are points I don't want to forget. And I know, like, once I'm up here, I forget. But for me, it's really inspiring as someone who only came out a few years ago, like 5-6 years ago, because I grew up in a very homophobic family, and that whiteness was so ingrained that I'm like, no, queer people are bad, so I'm not bad because I'm a good person, right? And that's the type of shit that I want to avoid in young kids and even in older folks who still need to hear that and need, right, like Janelle was saying, that still need that permission in those models. So for me, it's really powerful to be amongst all of you here who exist unapologetically, right? Sin pedirle disculpa que existe, simplemente, right? As your full selves. So for me, that's part of what keeps me going, keeps me empowered, and keeps me sane. So thank you all.
Anyone here, or in any of you, if you want to take that question?
Yeah, so I was going to say being unapologetically me. And I remember being on this conference, and at the end, somebody asked me, and I was like, do you see me here taking this space that has been so wide that it was criticized, and they had to make an effort to have more diverse folks there. So my sole existence as a panelist or as a conference speaker, it's a political act of defiance, that system. So honestly, anything I create, it's very political and challenging, but I also the using native clays or native clay slips or darker clay bodies, even if they are imported. That's also a way of saying I don't want to appeal to your whiteness or what you think that is correct. In fact, in ceramics, white clay bodies are said to be pure or less or not contaminated, as opposed to darker clay bodies that are contaminated with metal, heavy metals, or something, things like that. So I want to like change that narrative because my dark skin is not contaminated. I just live on a tropical island and I have an advantage. So it's like it's just being diverse. So yes, I think that's just accepting and recognizing who you are in your place. I think that's the best way to fight the system, I guess. So also, yeah, really understanding, not only accepting it, but understanding it that it's not inherently bad, like we have been taught. So that's a way for me to keep saying. I also find that my spiritual practice is working with clay, so that also helps, just trying to manifest with my hands whatever I want to manifest. I am currently manifesting more monsters than usual. I call my art little monsters no matter what I do. Even if it's a mug, I do feel like they are omens that I somehow channel and they become a thing. And I am currently manifesting more weird art that some teachers have addressed as weird in a negative way, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna take that to my heart, because art it's art. I don't know, art is something that everybody should have the opportunity to express, and people don't have to consider it pretty. Sometimes art is not pretty. Art, I understand that art it's more for the person that creates it than for the people that are seeing it and might have an emotion. And that's something that's also being thought of. You have to create art that people feel something out of it. Well, not necessarily. I could feel nothing about the art, but what about you when you created it? What do you feel? So that's the importance of that. So that's, through art and through accepting and understanding that it's not bad. Thank you. Thank you, Mom.
Yo, en lo que en los años míos de juventud, siempre, la familia mía, con los americanos, this, americano that, to me, that was white, you know, as I got older. And why I care about it, because at first it's like, you know, we're Americans, like, why are you saying that? And then it's just kind of like, after like going through unos cuantos de años, maybe almost 20 years, trying to walk away from my family and my culture, my heritage, yo me dejé de hacer blanco, porque son españolos, y así era la familia mía. Y son católicos, Roman Catholic, like seriously. But guess what? They all mostly, besides the Afro influence of our ancestors, they all of them have majorly Taino ways of doing everything. So, as I've been taught, you know, as an adult. Para mí, el arte tiene, you can look at it in different ways, right? You're, like she was saying, hay un punto de vista que hay muchos puntos de vista que completa lo que tú estás viendo o lo que estamos viendo. Para mí, cuando yo decidí de hacer blanquito, que yo soy medio Sicilian, que era un punte para ponerme más adelante con las sociedades en donde yo estaba en la escuela y afuera en el trabajo, eso falló. Falló en muchas, in a lot of ways. With my ancestors, with my family, and with the white people. If anything, the white people thought I was more exotic and more interesting, and but I wasn't treated like anyone. So for me, I think it's always, even to this day, hard to really pay attention to all these people, to all these other ways of being, to Christianity. And for in some ways or another, I really did a favor to myself by doing that, because I got to know, and from what I've learned also growing up, because I grew up with a lot of Afro-American history and culture, and trying, I don't know why I didn't think I was African, because I also face colorism, right? What's the best way of surviving, and the African American community that survived here, is learning through their ways, right? We speak their language, we go to the schools, just like Yaseli was saying, we need to put ourselves in spaces, and our people's spaces, and break all these narratives and all these thoughts and perceptions that aren't real, that are really racist. So for me, I pay attention to those things on a day-to-day basis. Para mí, yo vivo ahora con mi familia. Tuve un brain surgery, una cirugía de cerebro. Hace 2 años y medio, ahora I'm disabled, so I have to live with my family. So I still, even when I go to family reunions, because I love my family and I'm a medicine person, and I always has been, even for my family when I was younger, and I didn't know it, I still fight with them. I still, even, have my mother being racist towards me. And there's this inner racism that I have to deal with so that I can circumvent and make sure that I don't get lost and let other people put me down. And I even pointed out to other people, even people who come to me for, readings, people who come to me for an interfaith minister too, for just spiritual guidance, people who come to me who I'm teaching, like right now. And that's part of my ministry, is to break down and decolonize and genderize. Because even with that, my mother sometimes, when I fully started coming out, it was at the New York Renaissance Fair, and that was before me. Y mi mamá le gustaba un buen chiste o un gato. So to her, I was a clown. And then she started seeing that it was becoming more of an everyday thing, and I'm doing this in my everyday life. And then she would say things, and I'm like, why do you have to say it that way? What's so funny about that? What's so funny about me wearing a woman's top? What's so funny about me wearing red? Or, I'm not being a clown. So, to me, I throw it back in their face. That's a healing way for me. But another way is also meditation. The other way is therapy. I go to therapy a lot. Mostly because of the healing of the surgery of my brain. But talking to others, and sitting in circles like this, hearing other people's stories, making me feel like I'm not alone, because sometimes you feel alone. You feel alone and you're like the only person in the world. And that's the worst. So, empowering myself, learning to empower. I spent 16 years in a nonprofit world in New York City. I was born and raised there. Empowering other people. But guess what? When I went home, did I do it for myself? When I went to school, did I do it for myself? No. I was always living up to somebody else. So I think that's something else that we all lack is that, we have to take care of ourselves and heal ourselves. Go ahead on.
I can share a little bit. Thank you and everyone for sharing and being so honest and vulnerable. I wanted to touch upon a little bit, what you just mentioned, the loneliness. It's interesting because the Surgeon General of the United States mentioned loneliness as the top major crises that we are experiencing in our species, you know, as humans. And I think a lot about the difference between solitude and not necessarily loneliness, but aloneness, or the illusion of being alone, and how, you know, mental health being something that we all struggle with, and that is part of our challenge and core sense of tension as human beings on this planet. Yet we don't necessarily talk about it on a day-to-day basis. I think quite often just when we greet each other and we ask each other, how are you? And how often we say, okay, or fine, or I'm good. Do those things actually mean those things? And in you know, the spaces that I occupy, I use quite a bit of Gloria Wilcox, who's a neuropsychologist, developed a feelings wheel, and it's a tool that is used to identify, you know, your emotions and your feelings on any given day or moment, and it's something that I use quite often in my work and in my practice, so that we can bring awareness to the self, so that we can then shift awareness to each other. And I think that that is something that has kept me focused, I think, on what it is that I'm here to do in this lifetime. And I know that I am very specifically here to balance masculine and feminine energies within our consciousness. And the way that that looks through self-expression and creation. And, you know, but the other side of that is like, you know, that idea of navigating, like I think about that word, navigation, and what it means to navigate, going from one space to another, and it's really about the journey or the process. It's never necessarily about the destination. But I also think about that, what is the thing that we're holding as the center point, right? Like in navigation, there needs to be like a center point, and usually that's like where I'm at in relationship to where everything else is at. And so therefore you're constantly, again, shifting awareness between where am I, where is everything else, where are all the markers. And I think that sometimes that's the part where you can feel that loneliness, because it is you're navigating in a very, and through the container of the self and in the body and in the ego. And I will be honest, like I feel very lonely in groups, actually. I feel amazing alone. It's insanely great by myself, or maybe with one other person or two other people, but I feel it's very difficult for me to be in large groups. Even intentional ones, even ones like this, even ones in retreats, I don't feel always a connection to people who are like me, or who share similar sentiments, or even are on similar journeys. And I've been placed in this world as an observer, and so I do a lot of that. I'm quite quiet, and one thing that I actually notice is how deeply internalized these systems of violence are in our interpersonal relationships. And I feel sometimes that for me, the trying to stay sane is through solitude, because when I'm immediately in a space with others, for whatever reason, I immediately focus in on how folks are replicating harm, or systems of harm, and I see that a lot in social space and social group, even if it's prayer, even if we're there for ceremony. And I wonder how often folks are thinking about the work that's done in silence versus the one that is done in an echo chamber. And not to say that I have an answer to that or an answer to any of these things, but really that's what I'm trying to work on and trying to stay sane on is really like, who are the major players in this walk of life for me who's going to uphold like a very specific philosophical framework of thinking, so that we're not replicating systems of harm and carceral states of punishment. Because actually we do that quite often, is punish each other when there's harm, right? And that just goes back into like, what does justice look like in relationships? But I want us to all hold in our minds when are moments when we've punished someone for the harm that they've caused versus holding someone to the state of transformation that we would want to be held to. Because we actually punish people with belonging a lot. And you don't belong to this space, you don't belong to this place, you don't belong to this group, you don't belong to me, you don't belong to this conversation. So I'm gonna hold side conversation, I'm not gonna hold eye contact. I am not gonna include like so many ways that we do this in our relationships and sometimes unconsciously that are actually to our detriment and that keep us all disempowered. So I think that one thing that I do to stay sane is to really look at those kinds of patterns that emerge from collective being, specifically in spaces of liberation, and to think about, well, what is the thing that we're missing because we're not going to necessarily advance, even if we have the language to advance, simply because we have embodied so deeply those systems of harm and punishment that we are replicating them even in spaces of care, spaces of love, spaces of abolition, spaces of liberation. So honestly, keeping a critical lens is the thing that keeps me sane. So, I mean, just to end on a quite somber note, maybe.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Pues yo creo que todavía estoy navegando eso de mis hábitos, mis rutinas, mis ritos para poder moverme en una vida, en un mundo capitalista, súper colono, trabajo, o sea, me gano en la vida el sustento como bartender en la zona colonial, en el casco de San Juan. So, para mí es bien relevante todos los días que tengo que ir hacia allá. Pues no solamente por mi imagen trans o queer, sino también por ser de color. Y estas personas me asocian a un libro que vieron de pinturas indígenas. Como que recibí comentarios desde que soporto mejor la calor, o si puedo abrir un poco fácilmente y cosas así. En mi diario o preguntas sobre mi nombre, esto conlleva una preparación desde que me levanto para ir a ese espacio, a hacer un poco de dinero para poder seguir metiéndolo a todo lo que hago por detrás que me está dando sustento. Estoy provocando unos espacios de junta intencional, gracias Ginette, voy a adoptar esa palabra. Encuentras intencionadas de escritura creativa con vista a sanar, a soltar, a escribir nuestras verdades, y siento que ese trabajo es el que me alimenta para yo poder ir a mi otro trabajo o a mi otra vivencia. Yo digo, me disfrazo, me transformo. Antes practicaba el transformismo, hacía drag kings con Drag Kings PR. Estuve en ese movimiento desde que inició prácticamente, y así fue también que comencé mi expansión de género y a borrar esas líneas binarias de mi ser. Y todas esas cosas que al principio eran bien problemáticas y me traían mucho dolor porque era mucha confrontación que no quería. Soy una persona bien tranqui y no aprendí que hay que aceptar a veces las confrontaciones y escoger nuestra batalla, pero siempre salvaguardando esa sanidad para mí, que es lo que estoy aprendiendo. Y boundaries ha sido algo que me ha salvado la vida. Boundaries para personas, boundaries conmigo misma, y hasta decidir que pues tengo que permanecer por un tiempo determinado en este lugar para poder alcanzar otras cosas que deseo. Exponerme ese cambio yo misma pues me ayudó a encontrar paz también con lo que estoy haciendo y fuerza, ¿verdad? Para seguir y creo en los espacios antiacadémicos y de educación, por eso estoy aspirando a que estos movimientos sigan creciendo y estos espacios de conversa también. Y creo que también mi familia ha sido mi familia escogida, mi pareja, mis amigues, y regresar a mi familia con este verso que estoy llevando ahora, hacer una ruptura en estos lugares. Mi familia es cristiana, católica, apostólica, reventada así, igual como que borran todo lo nativo con decir, no, es que hay alguien que era de España, y borran toda la demás de tu herencia por darle énfasis a eso. Y hasta pues he empezado a ir para allá así, con agua, con vija, con pelos en la cara, pelos en las piernas, como que a crearles a ellos la incomodidad desde el amor. Y en verdad he empezado a crear una resonancia bien diferente a lo que esperaba. Ya no hay resistencia, ya como que cada vez van recibiendo más desde el amor, pues la persona que soy y las personas que otras personas están siendo. Eso, ver ese trabajo que está dando fruto, pues también me ayuda a seguir, ¿verdad? con la resistencia pues que llevamos todos por ser no puedo decir nada. Pero me entendieron. Gracias.
Gracias. Do we have time for another question or?
One more.
Yeah. Por el tiempo, pues tengo que como skip algunas de las preguntas y voy a hacer una última pregunta para así como culminate, para así después dejar espacio para la próxima presentación. Pero primero le quiero dar las gracias a todos por todo lo que han compartido, and, for being here virtually and in person. The last question is, what message or invitation do you want to give to the larger Taino community? ¿Qué mensaje o invitación, right, como like a challenge that you want to give to them, le quieres dar a la comunidad entera?
Voy a seguir, aprovechar. Antes de que me quede sin saliva. Pues en verdad me siento bien conmovida por estar aquí, agradecida por la oportunidad que Ra nos convocó y por conocerles, por compartir lo que somos con todos, porque pienso que el problema de que yo no me veía, que ella no se veía antes, que no estaban estas cosas pasando. Quiero que exhortar a todos que sean ustedes mismos, sea straight, queer, non-queer, ally, lo que sea, pero vivir desde tu autenticidad, desde tu lugar de origen, como la medicina está donde tú naces, conectarte con eso y tenemos que conectar también con la comunidad y juntarnos, dejarnos de diferencias para poder pensar en un bien mayor, ¿verdad? Que es lo que nuestros ancestros hicieron, ¿verdad? Esto Alfonso me lo decía mucho, Ginette, que ella se dice, el palo mango está hoy porque alguien hace 40 años lo puso ahí y no era para ti, o sea, no lo pensaron así, pero tú estás hartándote de ese palo. Como que retomar esos pensamientos de que quizás estoy haciendo algo por ahí, estoy haciendo algo en el momento, pero va a dar un fruto que yo no le voy a ver, pero va a seguir aquí un legado. Retomarnos esa capacidad y pensamiento de que we don't need to be superheroes wearing a cap o ser X-Men para dejar un legacy. Tocando pequeñas vidas uno puede dejar un impacto mayor y defender nuestro ser y nuestra tierra que está siendo privatizada y atacada. Recientemente traté de visitar al Yunque para ofrecer un rezo por esta reunión y no podemos subir porque está privatizado, tienes que hacer citas, los espacios están salvaguardados primordialmente para el turismo. Y en verdad eso me entristeció mucho, me dio mucho dolor, que nuestros espacios no podemos accesar a ellos. So let's wake up desde el amor y juntarnos para defendernos. Y gracias.
Any message message that anyone has?
I feel que como que ¿Cómo seguimos? Pero sí, creo que hago eco de las palabras de G. Pienso que la mejor manera también es ser curiosa, no sé, si no estás clara de qué está pasando contigo, pues, tener curiosidad y empezar a averiguar. Y hace poco, medio random, pero creo que un poco tiene que ver aprendiendo el idioma con Rap, me di cuenta en la lista de las palabras abusa. Mi mamá y mi abuela usaban abusa para allá y yo, ¿what? Yo nunca entendí de dónde vino esa palabra y qué tenía que ver con ve allá, but now I know, que es una palabra dañina. Esta curiosidad que yo he tenido por conectar me ha llevado a darme cuenta que hay mucho, como dice Julián, de las prácticas que tenemos son prácticas indígenas y yo, ¿verdad? Ya no me pasa tanto, pero estando aquí más cerca de la metrópoli de San Juan, que está tan heavily influenced by external things, me pasaba mucho y me pasa que no me entienden cuando hablo porque uso muchas palabras que usan en el oeste, como el abusa, por ejemplo. Hey, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Pues, y tengo que explicar todo esto, and then, now I know where it comes from, pero antes era como, lo decía mi abuela, can I say? So, yo pienso que esa curiosidad también es importante tenerla para tu encontrar y conectar con la madre tierra, con tu origen, la que te dio como el espíritu,
Yeah.
if you want to believe in that, right? So, it's very real.
I'll just quickly add on to what was said, that a message for the larger Taino community. I'd say, siguiendo con la curiosidad, que pregunten y averigüen en Google. Everybody can Google nowadays, right? So if you are straight ally or whatever it is, to interrogate the colonialness inside of you, right? The coloniality. Que todos tenemos la mente colonizada y es un proceso, it's a lifelong journey, right? To decolonize and interrogate our racism, our heteronormativity, our homophobia. So you're never done doing the work, and that's my biggest message. So always be open to hearing our perspectives, to listening to younger generations, to listening to older generations, and to push back on all generations and ask questions and think about how you are perhaps being one of those isms, right? And microaggressions, right, that maybe you're not recognizing. So that's my message to the larger community, right? That we all have work to do to, whether you're part of this community or not, like, we all need to continue to, unfortunately, unpack and disrupt and undo all those years of mental, spiritual, physical colonization that we're still embodying.
I would like to add that I would challenge, first of all, when I think about the Taino community, and one of my biggest messages that I would like to give today, though I think we've come a long way also since the resurgence coming out visibly, is for Peabody people, like Lysa, my biggest thing too, especially coming back into it. First of all, I have to say, I realized in therapy and talking to other tribal people that for the last 10, 12 years, maybe a little longer than that, I dedicated, actually, the last 30 years, I dedicated a lot to my ancestors and my culture, my Taino culture, and where I come from, and taking back my heritage and making that my power. But the other thing is, at the same time, I sideline who I really am, which is all of this that you see today, right? And I put that first, and me second. And again, this is a pattern in my life. It's a best, so my thing is, going forward, to the larger Taino community, I would like to challenge them to, like, whenever they talk to us, whenever they engage with us, you know, because we all, before we knew or we didn't know that we were Taino, we would say, you know, tengo una abuela que se parece una india, un papá, un abuelo, whatever. And then you're looking, you know, they see you or they see somebody else or we see somebody else and you're like, damn, that's family. They look like my family. Right? So I would challenge the Taino community to really look at us when they're talking to us and engaging us and see if they find themselves in us. Because for me, I come from a upbringing with a story from another Taino group, a spiritual one, where the creator was, well, the creator of us humans was non-binary, wasn't a man and wasn't a woman. And for me, when I think of that, and I meditate on that story a lot, for me, what I think of is past lives. How we all go through, and I'm a big believer in past lives and reincarnation, having my own experiences since I was little. We all go around thinking that we're this person and that we've always been this person. And then when it comes to us queer people, right, and transgender people especially, we are the epitome of that. You know, we're so powerful. We're here to remind people that you're much more than what you think you are. So that is my challenge. And the other one is that, you know, there's so much male dominance within the Taino community still that I don't think has really changed much. That, and I say this because of my own, what I've seen in my own experiences and interactions, and how people have seen me, is I challenge them also to balance their, to speak to really walk their truths. You know, if you really believe in your ancestors' ways, then you believe in peace. You don't believe in the war thing. You know that you need to be a warrior when you need to be a warrior. But you also believe in, you know, each one taking care of one, meaning in all different ways, heart, mind, and soul. I would challenge the community, you know, on that because I grew up with seeing my mother being violated a lot, and I, growing up, got violated too, in many different ways, sexually as well. So, yeah, there you go.
For sure. And I think that, you know, that what you're just mentioning and acknowledging, and once again, like how the systems of harm that we replicate and that we continue to embody. I also would agree, and some of what you're sharing resonates deeply with some of my own observations within our communities, plural. I also just feel like I feel like where folks and groups are operating in silos, like people are organizing in these ways that are very disconnected, and I'm wondering at what point do we start to actually create a network of individuals that are connected? It's like, think about the amount of effort, labor, work, research, investigation that every single person in this space, virtual and physical, had to do to arrive to this space, physical and virtual. And what I mean by that is, like, what was your journey up until this point? And like, how did you piece together all of the facets of information that you now know? And why is it so hard for us to do that? And as someone who has been able to sit with many different elders and leaders in our communities, I still feel like everyone's still operating in their own space. Like, there's still no like unified sense of just like purpose for the future, around like what it is that we're trying to share, and also how this work is going to live on beside every single one of us, because you know our physical realities are very short, and so we can't be as short-sighted as to believe that we own any piece of this kind of work that any of us are doing. And so why is it that, I don't know, why do we operate with such disconnect, even though everyone knows each other? And I feel like that's a conversation that some of our elders need to have with each other, like contending with their own histories, and also with ego. But I also still see that same system replicating itself with folks in our generation, folks that are pushing along ceremony, pushing along circle, classes, you name it. It's almost as if only one person can do something. And I don't understand how we can still be upholding all of these like colonial, patriarchal, capitalistic viewpoints and also talk about like ancestral technology. And I sometimes wonder, like, are we looking at that critically? Like, are we looking at the things that our actions speak volumes? So I feel like we, for whatever reason, just need to get our shit together, like, fast. Like, somebody, and I don't know who that person is gonna corral all of the bodies. But every time, there's so much hurt, I feel, in our community, and I see that we struggle to know, like, what do we latch onto, like, where do we belong, how do we belong, how are our children going to belong to this thing, to this language, to each other. Because they've raptured us so much that we have the opportunity to now connect, and why is it that we're still choosing rapture? And maybe that's, again, goes back to why I feel like I'm in constant solitude. But I'm wondering why we just can't get our connection together. And just very flat with like plain facts. I just don't understand.
That's what I
But it's like, come on.
I agree with you 100%, Jeanette, and I think about that. I was thinking about that last night, you know. I was looking at all the comments that people have at the conference and why there's gay people in the conference, you know. I've had leaders in our community today who are alive tell me, you can't be that, you know, because you're gay. And that is a colonial thing, and there were no gay people. And women can be leaders. That's not a Taino thing, so you're not Taino. And it's goes back to what you're saying, like, why can't we just get our shit together? Why y'all mad? I'm sorry to end like so abrupt, because I think we could continue this conversation, and we will, because you know I'll create the next Zoom thing and we'll be on in there and have a conversation. But thank you, Puya, Jeanette, Hib, Nivia, Gaceli, for being here and lending their time and their expertise and their creativity and all the stuff that you brought. And we will, of course, continue this conversation as a collective. So, gracias.